Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us again. We are continuing in our discussion about reshoring, nearshoring, or do nothing. We are joined by David Pate, who's a vice president at TBM Consulting Group and a leader in our operational excellence practice. I'm Paul Vespoli, and I'm responsible for client service at TBM. David, thanks for joining us again.
Glad to be here, Paul.
All right. So just reviewing where we've been in this conversation, part one was really about making the decision to reshore, nearshore, or do nothing. The second piece that we just covered was the decision was made, and we talked about some of the solutions and challenges of nearshoring and reshoring. Well, today we're going to talk about specifically reshoring and what some of the success factors for relocating to the US or Canada would be. There are three key points that we'll touch on. One is optimizing the production processes in your environment. Second is reducing waste and cost. And the third is a little bit of thought around how to best leverage automation. So in thinking through these topics, the idea of bringing manufacturing in-house, around optimizing your production and process, that's a critical effort to the success of this sort of initiative. And as we think about this conversation, David, one of the taglines that we throw away sometimes is about being lean and mean. Well, what does that mean in the context of reshoring and all the kind of decision-making process that's involved?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. So yeah, being lean and mean, and to me, mean really means being competitive, right? I mean, we're in business to win, and the results of not winning are not a price we want to pay, right? So being lean and mean to me means being really competitive. And so that really means creating the least waste processes that we can. Labor cost as well as labor availability are key challenges. So making the most of our manufacturing and distribution processes is critically important. Making them as productive as possible in order to make the reshoring effort successful. Over the years, a lot of things went offshore because of the labor cost and the capital cost. And so, through the total cost of ownership model, and the environments have changed, supply chains have become less reliable, then those things have changed. Yet we still need to have the most effective manufacturing processes that we can. So, reduce waste in all processes, optimize the labor that we have, and making sure the equipment is very, very reliable, because people waiting on equipment is just as wasteful as not having the labor. Driving quality as well as flexibility. And a lot of times, people talk about cost improvements and flexibility improvements at the expense of quality. You really have to do all three of those things. And then having the right size capital improvement plan. Don't go big just because it's faster. It's got to be sized right to meet the demands I need to meet. Because in this environment where capital is very, very expensive, you've got to make sure you're making the right investments. So make long-lasting improvements around visual control and what we call tiered accountability management systems to drive performance each and every day. That's really continuous improvement. And having the effective sustainment strategies. And those are things that we work with the clients all the time, how to make their processes more productive, and also drive that accountability back into those processes every day.
No, that's great, David. And I think when you talk about investing, you're not only talking about investing financially, you're talking about investing effort to make sure that those things are tight. So thanks for those comments. That's great.
Yeah, exactly, Paul. And just to elaborate on that point, we always say you can do anything you want, you can't do everything. So in a world of limited resources, you have to make decisions. You have to prioritize what are the most impactful things I can be doing.
So true, right? If we could only do it all, we could solve a lot of problems. It's just not practical. But speaking of being practical, one of the topics that comes up a lot of times, especially at a plant level, is the use of automation. And I think there's a definite benefit to be found there. But it's not just clearly automation for automation's sake, or new technology would be great. But when you talk about, here again, investing in automation, what are some of the considerations that you would point out with that, David?
Yeah, first and foremost, we always talk to our clients about making sure that your investments in automation be done in conjunction with your process optimization efforts. And what do I mean by that? So automating waste in the process is not an effective use of those scarce capital resources. And ultimately, it's going to result in a sub-optimized process. So leaning the process out, making that process as effective as I can, and then automating in the places that it makes sense to automate in is the best way to approach it. So where labor is repetitive, and certainly in today's environment, in a lot of locations, labor is hard to come by. So things that it's easy to automate, it makes sense to do, but again, take the waste out of the process first. And then the other things that automation can help us do is enhance process capability. Sometimes machines, by their very nature, can be have a very high process capability where human assembly or human processes can give us more challenge there. So those are things that we like to look at and recommend to our clients. And then, as I said, align it with process optimization, and then don't automate waste.
Right. And, especially going into a recessionary environment, we've got two slides in a row that talk about investing. This might be a topic for a future discussion, but what better time to really tighten up those operational processes and invest the time and effort when you can most impact things. So that's great.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. One, that really successful companies invest in tough times. That investment allows them to bridge the gap, if you will, over those tough economic times, and they have to have an ability to do that, obviously, but allows them to bridge the gap. But then it also positions them to springboard growth as things turn around, as you come out of recession. And we've got a future series coming up talking about that in particular. But the other thing you can do is to mitigate some of that risk. And one way to mitigate risk is to partner with other companies who share a need for like materials, and can share some of those costs to reshoring. And the other is, we mentioned this early on, is it doesn't have to be vertical integration. Certainly bringing things not only reshored, but in-house is an option. But you can also work with suppliers as partners to bring that production in a reshored, nearby, local supply chain, campus, if you wish, type supply chain, and that alleviates a lot of risk to an investment for your company, yet gives you many, if not most, of the benefits of doing the reshoring. The other thing that you should investigate is governmental incentives. Now, those are available to different degrees wherever you go, both by state and even by county across the U.S., but it is something that should be part of your plan. That is particularly true where you're going to be creating additional labor force, and so training incentives and things like that are available. But there's also land and building development incentives, lots of different things that are available to companies. And while we don't do that kind of work ourselves, we have connections to other companies that do get into that space. And finally, it's really important to carefully manage that reshoring process to mitigate the risk. It is a very critical project management activity. So developing a detailed plan, And I would include as part of a detailed plan a very practical plan. Very often companies want to be very, very aggressive, and while speed is important, you really have one shot to get this right, and failing is an expensive proposition. So identifying potential risks and mitigating those risks is very, very important. So having a clear and realistic understanding of what the timeline for reshoring needs to be, as well as the resources are going to be required, and then making sure things stay on track is vitally important.
Excellent. So it's actively managing the process, right? It's not just set the machine and let it go. That's
Absolutely not. Yeah, exactly.
great feedback. Well, all of these kind of pieces of the conversation that we've been talking about so far, we always come to the, okay, now what? So we've made the decision to reshore, and we've done some of the things that, you've talked about, some of the considerations that you suggested we make. What next? So can you talk to the steps that would follow from here, David?
Sure, Paul. As I like to say, so what, now what? So, one, you need to do a diagnosis on your particular situation in your operations, right? Determine what the full potential is for those operations, and what the gap is between where I am today and what that full potential is, and closing that, helping identify that, and helping companies close that gap is what we're all about. Then, as you do that diagnosis and understand the gap to full potential and what I need to do to get there, evaluate the incentives as well as potential partners, be those partners for supply or supply chain partners that you can work with to mitigate some of those risks, and incentives to mitigate some of the cost. And then lastly, as I mentioned, these are things that we help clients with. Engage with a third-party operations or supply chain experts. There's no fault in getting help to help manage through these processes and challenges that you're going to face doing this. As we started this series, that it's a large investment. There's a large project. There's a lot of work to make this successful, but there's also a very, very great reward. So it's worthwhile to do so, and do it the right way.
Absolutely. And I think, as much as a manufacturing company can be experts in their processes and the products that they manufacture, even in their customers, there's a specific set of knowledge that's required to make a good decision on reshoring. And there are a lot of moving pieces, candidly. So appreciate your perspective on that. It's okay to get help with that, and probably advisable to get help with that. So thanks, David, for those comments. Just kind of to wrap things up, we have another piece of the conversation that's coming soon. And there are some key topics. So it's, making reshoring successful in the US is still the broad heading. But then within that, we'll talk about reshoring labor strategy. No matter how good your operational processes are, no matter how tight you are with your automation, it's ultimately people that will make your initiative successful. Because that's generally how we deliver our work. So we'll talk about, reshoring labor strategy. We'll talk a little bit more about implementing automation, a little bit additional on that. And then, a topic that's gained a lot of traction lately is around environmental, social, and governance considerations, which can be very impactful for manufacturing companies as well. We thank you for joining us again, and we look forward to seeing you in our next installment of the conversation. Thank you.
Thanks.